Hello friends, please like and subscribe to the channel and enjoy the stories. Chapter 1, The Stranger Beneath the Willow. The autumn air was crisp in the sleepy town of Eldenbrook, where leaves danced in the wind like tiny flames, setting the cobblestone streets ablaze with color. Beneath the sprawling arms of an ancient willow tree, nestled by the edge of Clearvale Lake, stood a girl clutching a notebook, its leather cover worn with age. Her name was Lila, and the pages of her journal were an intricate tapestry of sketches and prose, each one inspired by the serene beauty of the town she called home. Today, however, the tranquility felt strained. There was something about the sky, a bruised violet haze creeping in from the west, that unsettled her. Still, she lingered by the willow, her pencil tracing soft lines on paper, capturing the reflection of the fading sun in the ripples of the lake. "Excuse me," a voice broke the silence, deep and lilting. Startled, Lila looked up to see a stranger standing just a few feet away. He was tall, with hair as dark as the shadows stretching beneath the trees and eyes that seemed to absorb the very light around them. His coat was long and a little too formal for the countryside, but it carried the scent of sea salt and something ancient, as though he had stepped out of another time entirely. "Sorry to disturb you," he said, his lips curving into a polite smile. "I was wondering if this is the way to Eldenbrook Inn." "It is," Lila replied, her voice steady despite the peculiar sense of déjà vu that struck her. She gestured toward the narrow path winding back toward town. "Just follow that trail. It's about a 15-minute walk." "Thank you," he said, but didn't move. His gaze flickered to her notebook. "You're an artist?" "Of sorts," Lila said, closing the book protectively. "Do you draw for anyone else? Or just for yourself?" he asked, tilting his head slightly. The question caught her off guard. Most people in Eldenbrook were too preoccupied with their routines to notice things like that. Yet here was this stranger, probing with a curiosity that felt both genuine and unnerving. "Mostly for myself," she admitted. "I see," he murmured, his tone contemplative. Then, after a pause, "Would you mind terribly if I stayed here for a while? It's been a long journey, and this spot looks like it holds stories." Lila hesitated. Something about him was magnetic, though not in the romanticized way of novels. It was subtler, an inexplicable gravity that made the air feel heavier. "I suppose," she said finally. "It's not my tree, after all." The stranger chuckled softly and sat down on the grass, keeping a respectful distance. For a time they said nothing. The willow's branches swayed gently, their rustling like whispers of secrets too old to comprehend. "Do you believe in fate?" the stranger asked suddenly, his voice barely louder than the wind. The question startled her. She glanced at him, but his face was inscrutable, his eyes fixed on the lake. "I don't know," she said. "I think people find meaning in what they want to believe. Why?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned back on his elbows and exhaled deeply. "Sometimes, I think fate isn't about what happens to us, but who we meet along the way. A single encounter can change everything." Lila felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cooling air. "That sounds ominous." "Not ominous," he said, his smile faint. "Just true." As the sun dipped below the horizon, the stranger finally stood. "Thank you for letting me sit here," he said. "Perhaps we'll meet again, Lila." Her heart skipped a beat. "I didn't tell you my name." He paused, the smile slipping from his face for the briefest moment. "Didn't you?" Before she could respond, he turned and walked away, disappearing down the trail toward Eldenbrook Inn. That night, Lila dreamed of the lake. But in the dream, its waters were dark and restless, and the willow tree stood alone, its branches reaching desperately toward an empty sky. When she woke, her notebook lay open on her desk. She didn't remember leaving it there, and she certainly didn't remember drawing the sketch that now filled its center. The stranger standing beneath the willow, his coat billowing as if caught in a storm. Around him, the world was crumbling, and written in the corner in handwriting that wasn't hers were the words, "The first choice has been made." Chapter 2, The Letter Without an Address. Lila couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. It wasn't just the eerie message scrawled in her notebook or the vividness of her dream. It was the lingering presence of the stranger, as though his very existence had seeped into the marrow of her thoughts. She carried her unease with her to the cafe the next morning, a quaint little place nestled between a bookstore and a flower shop on Eldenbrook's main street. The bell above the door jingled as she entered, and the smell of freshly baked scones greeted her like an old friend. "Morning, Lila," called Maeve, the cafe owner, from behind the counter. She was a cheerful woman in her 60s, with a knack for remembering everyone's favorite orders. "Morning," Lila replied, managing a smile. She settled into her usual corner seat, pulling out her notebook. For a while, she tried to sketch the bustling scene around her. The couple by the window sharing a pot of tea, the toddler squealing with delight as his mother handed him a cookie. But her pencil seemed to have a will of its own. No matter how hard she tried, it kept returning to the image of the stranger beneath the willow. She was so engrossed in her drawing that she almost didn't notice Maeve approaching with a cup of chamomile tea. "On the house today," Maeve said with a wink, setting the cup down. "Thanks," Lila said, her smile a little more genuine this time. As Maeve turned to leave, she paused. "Oh, by the way, this came for you." She handed Lila a cream-colored envelope, its edges slightly frayed. "For me?" Lila frowned, turning the envelope over in her hands. There was no name, no address, just her first name, written in a bold, elegant script. "Someone dropped it off early this morning," Maeve said. "Didn't catch their name, but they said you'd know what it was about." Lila's heart thudded in her chest. "Did they say anything else?" Maeve shook her head. "Just handed it to me and left. Seemed polite enough, though." With a murmured thanks, Lila waited until Maeve returned to the counter before carefully breaking the seal on the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded neatly. The message was short. "Meet me at the Willow. Midnight." Lila stared at the note, her thoughts racing. The handwriting was the same as the words in her notebook. Her pulse quickened as she considered the implications. Had the stranger written this? And if so, how had he known where to find her? Part of her wanted to crumple the note and forget the whole thing. But another part, the part that had spent years yearning for something extraordinary to happen in her quiet life, was already imagining herself walking through the moonlit woods, her curiosity leading her into the unknown. That night, as the clock struck midnight, Lila found herself standing beneath the willow tree. The air was still, and the lake mirrored the crescent moon, casting a silver glow over the scene. "You came," said the familiar voice, and Lila turned to see the stranger stepping out from the shadows. "You left me a note," she said, her voice sharper than she intended. "How do you know my name? How do you know anything about me?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into the pocket of his coat and pulled out a small, intricately carved locket. "This belonged to someone I knew a long time ago," he said, holding it out to her. Lila hesitated before taking it. The locket was cool to the touch, its surface etched with swirling patterns that seemed to shift under the moonlight. "What does this have to do with me?" she asked. "Open it," he said softly. Inside was a tiny portrait, a girl with Lila's face, though her clothes and hairstyle were from another era entirely. Her breath caught in her throat. "What is this?" "It's you," he said simply. Or rather, it was you. "That doesn't make any sense," Lila whispered, taking a step back. "I don't expect you to believe me," the stranger said, his voice tinged with regret. "But you and we've met before. Many times in many lives, and every time it ends the same way." "What are you talking about?" Lila demanded, her heart pounding. "The choice you made to come here tonight," he said, gesturing to the locket, "is just the first step. But the rest is up to you. If you want to break the cycle, you have to trust me." Lila shook her head. "This is insane. I don't even know your name." For the first time, the stranger looked genuinely pained. "You used to call me Ash." Before she could respond, the ground beneath her feet began to tremble. The willow's branches thrashed violently, though there was no wind. "What's happening?" Lila cried, clutching the locket tightly. Ash stepped closer, his expression grave. "The cycle is waking up, and this time, it's not going to let us go so easily." Chapter 3: The Cycle's Grip. The ground quaked beneath Lila's feet, a deep rumble that seemed to resonate from the very bones of the earth. She stumbled, clutching the willow's gnarled trunk for support. Ash grabbed her arm, steadying her as the air grew heavy, charged with an otherworldly energy. "What do you mean, the cycle?" she shouted over the eerie hum that now filled the night. Ash's grip tightened. It's complicated, but if we don't move now, we'll both be caught in it again. Caught in what? Lila demanded, her fear giving way to frustration. Before he could answer, the lake began to ripple violently, though no wind disturbed its surface. The water darkened, its silvery sheen replaced by an inky blackness that swallowed the moonlight. From its depths emerged a towering figure, a humanoid shape cloaked in shadow, its eyes glowing like twin embers. Lila froze, her mind refusing to comprehend what she was seeing. The creature exuded a chilling presence, a palpable force that made the air hard to breathe. "So you return," the creature rumbled, its voice like grinding stone. It turned its gaze to Lila, its glowing eyes narrowing. "And you've brought her again, Ash. How predictable." Lila's heart raced as she looked to Ash for answers. His jaw was set, his expression a mixture of defiance and regret. "She doesn't belong to you," Ash said firmly, stepping in front of Lila. "She belongs to the cycle," the creature countered, its voice laced with malevolence. "As do you. This defiance is futile." "What is it talking about?" Lila whispered, her voice trembling. Ash turned to her, his dark eyes softening. "The cycle is a loop, a trap we've been caught in for centuries. Every time we meet, it tries to pull us back to the beginning, to undo everything." "I don't understand," Lila said, shaking her head. "Why me? Why us?" "You're the key," Ash said, his voice urgent. "In every cycle, you have a choice, but you never remember, and I can never make you see in time. That's how it keeps us here." "Enough," the creature boomed, stepping closer. The ground cracked beneath its feet, black tendrils snaking outward like roots. "You cannot escape me. Not this time." Lila stumbled back, clutching the locket. "What does it want?" "It wants to reset everything," Ash said. "To erase the progress we've made. But if we stand together, if you trust me, we can break free." The creature let out a guttural laugh. "Break free? How naive. She doesn't even know who you truly are, Ash. Tell her then, if you dare. Tell her what you've done." Lila's gaze snapped to Ash. "What is it talking about?" Ash hesitated, the weight of the creature's words settling over him. Tell her!" the creature roared, its voice shaking the trees. "I betrayed you," Ash blurted, his voice cracking. "In the first cycle, I made a choice that cost you everything. That's why we're here. Why we're trapped. I've been trying to fix it ever since." Layla felt the ground drop out from under her. "You betrayed me?" "I didn't know what would happen," Ash said desperately. "But every cycle, I try to make it right, to save you. Please, you have to believe me." The creature loomed closer, its tendrils reaching for Lila. "Do you see now? He's the reason for your suffering. End this, and you will be free." The locket in her hand grew warm, pulsing with a faint golden light. Lila's mind raced. Was Ash telling the truth? Or was the creature right? Was he the source of her pain? "Lila," Ash said softly, his eyes pleading. "I can't make this choice for you. But whatever you decide, I'll stand by you." The locket's light intensified, illuminating the darkness. It seemed to hum with life, its energy coursing through her veins. She looked at Ash, then at the creature, her thoughts a whirlwind of doubt and fear. Finally, she took a deep breath and whispered, "No more cycles." The locket burst into a brilliant light, blinding both Ash and the creature. The tendrils recoiled, and the ground beneath them stilled. Lila felt an overwhelming surge of power, as though the locket was rewriting the very fabric of reality. When the light faded, the creature was gone, and the lake had returned to its tranquil state. The willow's branches swayed gently in the breeze, as though nothing had happened. Ash knelt on the ground, his face etched with disbelief. "You did it," he said, his voice barely audible. Lila looked at the locket in her hand, its glow fading to a soft warmth. "I don't know what I did," she admitted, her voice trembling. "But I'm done being a pawn in someone else's game." Ash rose to his feet, his expression a mixture of relief and sorrow. "The cycle is broken, but breaking it comes with a price." "What price?" Lila asked warily. He stepped closer, his gaze meeting hers. "This will be the last time we meet, Leela. No more cycles means no more second chances. Whatever happens next, we face it alone." Leela's heart ached, though she didn't fully understand why. "I don't even know who I am to you," she whispered. "You were everything," Ash said simply. And with that, he began to fade, his form dissolving into the night, like mist in the morning sun. Lila stood beneath the willow, the locket heavy in her palm. The air was quiet, the world unchanged. Yet she felt different, as though she had left a part of herself behind, a part she would never truly understand. The cycle was over, but the story, it seemed, had only just begun. Chapter 4: Echoes of What Was Lost. For days, Leela walked through Eldenbrook as though in a dream. The sunlit streets and familiar faces felt distant, as if separated by an invisible veil. The willow tree stood as it always had by the lake, its ancient branches swaying gently in the breeze, yet every time she looked at it, she felt a pang of loss. Ash was gone, and with him the strange and surreal connection she could barely understand. She had broken the cycle. Yes, but what had she truly gained? And what had she lost? The locket remained with her, a constant reminder of that night. Its once glowing surface was now dull, though it still hummed faintly when she held it. She carried it with her wherever she went, hoping it might offer answers. It wasn't until a week later, as she sat on the dock by the lake, that something finally changed. The water was unusually still, its surface reflecting the sky with mirror-like clarity. Lila stared into its depths, absently running her fingers over the locket. "I don't understand," she murmured aloud. "I did what I was supposed to. Why does it still feel like something is missing?" The locket grew warm in her hand, startling her. A soft, melodic hum emanated from it, and the air around her seemed to shift. The reflection of the sky on the lake began to ripple, and Lila leaned forward, her breath catching in her throat. The image in the water changed. No longer a reflection, it now showed a scene, blurry at first, but gradually sharpening into focus. She saw herself, standing in a grand hall filled with towering columns and walls adorned with intricate carvings. Beside her stood Ash, his face softened with a warmth she hadn't seen before. They were laughing, their voices faint but clear, as if carried by the wind. "This can't be real," Lila whispered, her heart pounding. But the scene continued to play out. The Lila in the vision handed Ash the locket, her expression serious now. His lips moved, forming words she couldn't hear, but the look in his eyes spoke of trust and something deeper. Then the image flickered, replaced by another, a battlefield under a blood-red sky. Ash knelt in the mud, the locket clutched in his hand as dark figures loomed over him. His face was etched with pain and regret, his voice a distant echo. "I'm sorry, Lila. I'm so sorry." The vision shattered, and the lake returned to its serene reflection. Lila sat frozen, her mind reeling. "What was that?" she murmured, gripping the locket tightly. "Memories," came a voice, soft and familiar. Lila turned sharply, her breath catching as she saw a figure standing on the shore. It wasn't Ash, not exactly. His features were softer, younger, his presence less overwhelming but no less compelling. "You're not real," she said, her voice wavering. "Not in the way you think," the figure replied, stepping closer. "I'm what remains of him, a fragment, left behind when the cycle broke." Lila stood, the locket clutched tightly in her hand. "Why are you here? What do you want from me?" The figure's expression was both kind and sad. "To explain, to help you understand what you've done and what it means." "Then start talking," Lila said, her voice steadier now. The figure nodded. "Breaking the cycle didn't erase the past. It only severed the loop that kept us bound to it. The memories, the choices we made, the lives we lived, they still exist, scattered like fragments of a shattered mirror. The locket is the key to them." "So what?" Lila demanded. "I'm supposed to piece them together? Why? What's the point?" "The point," the figure said gently, "is that the story isn't over. You ended one chapter, but another has begun. The locket holds the power to reshape what was lost, to rebuild what was broken." Lila stared at him, her mind racing. "And Ash, the real Ash, where is he?" The figure's gaze dropped. "Gone. The cycle claimed him when it ended. But his essence, his choices, his hope, they're still within the locket, within you." Her grip on the locket tightened. "And if I don't want to do this? If I just move on? Then the past will remain as it is," the figure said simply. "But I think you already know that moving on isn't what you truly want." Lila looked down at the locket, its faint hum resonating with her heartbeat. The memories it held, the laughter, the sorrow, the love, were a part of her, even if she didn't fully understand them. "What do I have to do?" she asked finally. The figure smiled, a flicker of hope lighting his eyes. "Listen to the locket, follow where it leads, and remember, the choices you make now will shape what comes next. Not just for you, but for him." Before she could respond, the figure began to fade, his form dissolving into the soft light of dawn. "Wait," Layla called. But it was too late. She stood alone by the lake, the locket warm in her hand. The world was quiet, but within her a new resolve was forming. Chapter 5. The Locket's Call. The days that followed were a blur of restlessness and anticipation. Lila felt as though the locket was alive, its faint hum a constant presence that tugged at her thoughts. She wore it around her neck now, the cool metal resting against her skin like a hidden promise. It wasn't long before the locket began to guide her. The first sign came one evening as she walked home from the cafe. The air was crisp, the fading light casting long shadows across the cobblestone streets. She had just reached the edge of the town square when the locket grew warm against her chest. Startled, she stopped in her tracks. The warmth intensified, almost pulling her toward the narrow alley that ran alongside the old clock tower. "Okay," she murmured, her voice steady despite her pounding heart. "Show me." The alley was dim, its cobblestones uneven beneath her feet. She followed the locket's subtle tug, her steps quickening as the warmth grew stronger. Finally, she stopped in front of a crumbling brick wall. At first glance, there was nothing unusual about it, just a forgotten corner of the town. But as she reached out to touch the wall, the locket's hum deepened, and the bricks seemed to shimmer, their edges blurring like a mirage. "What is this?" Lila whispered, her fingers grazing the surface. The wall dissolved before her eyes, revealing a hidden doorway carved from dark stone. Intricate symbols were etched into its surface, glowing faintly with a golden light. The locket pulsed against her chest, urging her forward. Taking a deep breath, Lila pushed the door open. Beyond was a circular chamber, bathed in an ethereal glow. The air was thick with the scent of aged parchment and something sweeter, like blooming jasmine. Shelves lined the walls, filled with books, trinkets, and vials of shimmering liquid. At the center of the room stood a pedestal, and atop it rested a large crystal orb. As Leela stepped inside, the door closed behind her with a soft click. The locket's hum faded, replaced by a gentle vibration that seemed to emanate from the orb itself. "Welcome," said a voice, soft and melodic, yet undeniably powerful. Lila spun around, searching for the source. From the shadows emerged a woman draped in flowing robes of midnight blue. Her silver hair cascaded over her shoulders, and her eyes shone like stars. "Who are you?" Lila asked, her voice wary. The woman inclined her head. "I am Kalara, keeper of the threads, and you, child, have brought something most precious into my domain." Lila's hand instinctively went to the locket. "What do you mean? What is this place?" "This is the repository," Kalara said, gesturing to the shelves around them. "A place where fragments of time and memory are safeguarded. Your locket is one such fragment, a piece of a story that was never meant to end." Lila frowned. "Ash mentioned something about fragments. He said the locket holds pieces of the past, but I don't know how to use it, or even what I'm supposed to do with it." Kalara's gaze softened. "The locket is a key, but it is also a guide. It has brought you here for a reason. Within the repository, you will find echoes of the lives you and Ash shared, as well as the choices that bound you to the cycle. If you wish to uncover the truth, you must relive them." "Relive them?" Lila echoed, her stomach twisting. Kalara nodded. "Through the crystal," she said, gesturing to the orb. "It will show you the memories hidden within the locket, but be warned, what you see may not be easy to bear." Leela hesitated, her fingers tightening around the locket. Part of her wanted to walk away, to leave the past buried where it lay. But another part, a deeper, stronger part, knew that she couldn't move forward without understanding the truth. "I'll do it," she said finally, stepping toward the pedestal. Kalara smiled faintly. "Place your hands on the orb and let the locket guide you." Lila obeyed, her palms tingling as they made contact with the cool surface of the crystal. The locket flared with light, and the room around her dissolved into darkness. A moment later, she was standing in a new place, a grand ballroom filled with golden light. She wore a gown of emerald silk, her hair swept up in intricate braids. The air was filled with laughter and music, and across the room she saw him, Ash. He was younger, his face unlined by the sorrow she had come to know. He smiled at her, his expression radiant, and began to cross the room. "Lila," he said, his voice warm and familiar. "May I have this dance?" The memory unfolded around her, vivid and undeniable. She felt the weight of his hand on hers, the warmth of his gaze. For a moment, she forgot the present entirely, lost in the magic of the past. But then the scene shifted. The ballroom faded, replaced by a battlefield under a stormy sky. Ash knelt in the mud, the locket in his hand as dark figures surrounded him. "I'm sorry, Lila," his voice echoed. "I'm so sorry." The pain in his eyes was unbearable, and Lila felt herself pulled toward him, desperate to reach him. But before she could, the memory shattered, and she was back in the repository. Her knees buckled, and she would have fallen if Kalara hadn't caught her. "It is difficult, I know," Kalara said gently, "but this is only the beginning. Each memory you uncover will bring you closer to the truth and to the choice that lies ahead." "What choice?" Lila whispered, her voice shaking. Kalara's expression grew solemn. "The locket holds the power to rewrite the past. But in doing so, you may alter the present in ways you cannot predict. When the time comes, you must decide whether to use that power or to let the past remain as it is." Lila looked down at the locket, its glow dim but steady. The weight of her task settled heavily on her shoulders, but she knew she couldn't turn back now. "I'll do whatever it takes," she said quietly. Kalara nodded, her eyes filled with both pride and sorrow. Chapter 6: A Choice Beyond Time. The fragments came in waves, each one more vivid and heart-wrenching than the last. Through the locket's power, Lila relived moments of love, betrayal, joy, and despair. She saw herself and Ash across lifetimes, partners, enemies, strangers, and everything in between. Each memory carried the weight of decisions made and their consequences, but one memory stood out above the rest. It was the first. The scene unfolded in a quiet glade beneath a blood-red sky. Lila stood at the center, her arms outstretched, as the air crackled with raw energy. Across from her was Ash, holding the locket, his face torn between determination and regret. "You don't have to do this," she shouted, her voice filled with desperation. "This is the only way," Ash replied, his voice trembling. "If I give them the locket, they'll stop hunting us. You'll be safe." "They won't stop," Lila said, tears streaming down her face. "They'll destroy us both, and you know it. Don't let them win, Ash." He hesitated, the locket pulsing faintly in his hand. But before he could respond, shadowy figures emerged from the trees, their forms shifting and indistinct. "Time's up," one of them hissed. Ash turned to face them, his jaw set. "I'll give you the locket, but you have to swear she'll be left unharmed." "Ash, no!" Lila screamed, rushing toward him. But it was too late. Ash raised the locket, its golden light flaring as the shadows closed in. The moment it left his hand, the world seemed to shatter, fragments of light and darkness spiraling into chaos, and then everything went black. When the memory ended, Lila collapsed to the floor of the repository, her body trembling. Kalara knelt beside her, her expression grave. "You've seen the beginning," the keeper said softly. "Now you understand the cycle's origin and its purpose." Lila nodded weakly, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. "He gave up everything to protect me," she whispered, "even knowing it wouldn't work." "And now," Kalara said, "you must decide what to do with that knowledge." The locket glowed faintly, its warmth seeping into Lila's palm. She stood shakily, her gaze fixed on the orb in the center of the room. "What happens if I rewrite the past?" she asked. Kalara's expression grew somber. "If you choose to rewrite the past, you may save him, but at a cost. The lives you've lived, the lessons you've learned, the bonds you've forged, all of it could be undone. You would return to the beginning, with no guarantee of a different outcome." "And if I don't?" Lila asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then the cycle remains broken," Kalara said. "Ash's sacrifice will endure, and you will carry his memory forward into a new life. But he will be lost to you." Lila's heart ached at the thought. She had spent so much time searching for answers, clinging to the hope of finding Ash again. But now, faced with the enormity of her choice, she hesitated. Her gaze shifted to the orb, its surface shimmering with the memories she had uncovered. Each fragment told a story of love, loss, and resilience. Together, they formed a tapestry of her and Ash's shared existence, imperfect, but beautiful in its own way. "I can't erase everything we've been through," she said finally, her voice steady. "It would dishonor his sacrifice and everything we've learned." Kalara nodded, her eyes filled with quiet pride. "Then your path is clear." Lila stepped toward the orb, placing her hands on its surface one last time. The locket flared with light, filling the room with a golden glow. She felt its warmth envelop her, a gentle reassurance that she was making the right choice. "I won't forget you," she whispered, her voice filled with resolve. "Not in this life or the next." The orb's light dimmed and the locket fell silent. When Lila opened her eyes, she was standing outside the repository, the door hidden once more behind the crumbling brick wall. The locket still hung around her neck, but its hum was gone, its purpose fulfilled. Years passed, and Lila built a life filled with meaning and purpose. She carried Ash's memory with her, a quiet strength that guided her through every challenge. Though she never saw him again, she felt his presence in the moments that mattered most. In the laughter of friends, the beauty of a sunset, the stillness of a starry night. The locket remained with her, a silent testament to the love that had transcended time and space. And while the past could never be undone, Lila found peace in the knowledge that she had honored Ash's sacrifice by living fully in the present. Because sometimes, the greatest act of love is letting go.